Welcome to the Buy Box Bandits podcast.
What's up, everyone? Welcome back to the Buy Box Bandits podcast. Today we have a fantastic guest. One of our first guests, I think, located outside the U.S. too, but doing wholesale domestically. So we have Ian here who does wholesale full time, completely remote. So we're excited to dig into your origin story and setting up that business, running it while traveling, and all that. So thanks for being with us, man.
Yeah, no problem, guys. Thanks for having me on. It's a pleasure.
Oh yeah, definitely. So I assume it wasn't always the beautiful Instagram travel while also doing a big wholesale business lifestyle, but kind of talk to us how you got into all this that you do now, which looks like a pretty awesome life.
No, it hasn't. And, before we were rolling, Garrett just asked me, how did I end up in Mexico, which is currently home for me? So I can start at the beginning because it certainly wasn't. And it's even not now. So like what you guys see is probably different than what it is. And part of that is having like a really, really solid partner in the US, being my mom. So but to get there, like I'll wind way back. I'll start from the beginning. How I got here and why I'm remote now was because this was always like a huge priority for me. So I think I'm a bit older than you guys. You guys are young guns now. I'm 30. So when I was Hey, but compared to you guys, I wish I was doing this when I was your guys' age, So when I was around your age, back in college, I think 7 or 8 years ago, I was studying finance and entrepreneurship at that time. I knew I wanted to do something along those lines. And then I studied abroad in 2014. And when I did that, that was my first time leaving the US. And I knew like right away, like, oh, this is awesome. I want to do this more. Living and working abroad is something that I want to be like a big piece of my life. So I knew that was the case back in like 2014. And then I read Tim Ferriss's 4-Hour Work Week, which is a pillar of many people's, especially like if you run in like digital nomad scenes and whatnot, that's a big pillar of that kind of community. And when I got out of school, I worked for Target for a couple of years in distribution. So very close to Amazon. I worked in a warehouse as first like an operations manager, and then what they call a production controller, which is more or less just a strategist, kind of how do you get the boxes to the stores in time kind of a thing. But I learned a lot about processes and a lot about building and managing and leading teams during those couple of years. And then a time came where I knew I really wanted to get back on the road, and they didn't let me at that time. So this was 2017. And I asked him at that time, I was in really good standing and everything. And I asked my boss, I took a trip to India, and it kind of reignited the whole travel thing. And so my boss like, hey, it's time for me to take the next step in Target or whatever. I would just love to do something remote or something where I can travel. Like that's my priority. And we worked on it for a while. And back in 2017, it just like, it wasn't a thing at that time, working remote. Like they more or less laughed me out of the room.
And this is before obviously the major world event that we
exactly.
just
Exactly. They thought
now it's a different conversation.
That I wanted to work from a computer. Exactly. Now it's the norm. But I'm thankful that it worked this way, because then maybe I'd still be stuck there, because honestly, I had a great experience at Target. They took very good care of me. I couldn't believe how good of a job I got straight out of school. I was very, very lucky. And I honestly would have stayed. I would have been happy to stay. But they told me I couldn't be remote. And so I quit. And I went to teach English in China for a while, because at that time it was just, I needed to get abroad. Like that was the first step. I knew the other stuff with entrepreneurship and whatever else would come later. But I needed to get abroad. And that was kind of the path of least resistance at that point in time. It still is. Like the demand for teaching English in China is wild. I haven't seen many markets like that one. But anyway, I did it for a while, and I got abroad, and it was great. And it was what I wanted, but I kept coming back to, I want to work remote. Fast forward 8 months or so later, I left China, and I got my first fully remote job at a marketing agency based out of the States, but I was living in Poland at that time. And I did that for a while, and it was great. So they were like fully distributed, fully remote again before it was a thing. This was 2018. And I did it for a while. And again, I picked up a few useful skills, kind of same as Target, more along the lines of like analysis and getting sharp with Excel and looking at reports and kind of thinking about things in that sort of way that also translates to Amazon. And one thing led to another, and we had a disagreement, the company and I wasn't happy. I knew I wanted to get out of it anyway. But anyway, a few months before I left, I started flipping cameras. And that was my intro into e-commerce, arbitrage, all that stuff. And originally the first arbitrage, I guess, which I think is really interesting to talk about and doesn't get enough love, I think, in the world of arbitrage, is geographic arbitrage. Earning in one currency and living in another. Like that was what Tim Ferriss laid out in the 4-Hour Workweek. And I thought that was really interesting. So as we live in an arbitrage world, that's a section that like I don't get to talk about as much, that is so fascinating and I think would benefit a lot of people to learn more about. So anyway, I found a way to start doing cameras, and I was still living in Poland. Cameras, because at that time they're kind of like higher dollar items. So you guys know how it goes. You need to do less work per trade, essentially. I was finding them. My first one was from Craigslist, and then I hit Facebook Marketplace pretty hard and was selling them on eBay. So anyway, I was still in Poland at the time, and I got the idea, and I wanted to do this. And so I called. I had originally started to do this with my cousin like the year before. He ended up getting married and having a kid, and just life happened to him. And so I needed that partner in the States. And so I called my parents and I told them I want to do this. My mom was like, "Hey, I would like to do it. I'm interested in that." And so it ended up that I would find and negotiate the deals, and she would just need to go and pick them up. And then when the time came to sell them, she would put them in the mail and sell them. So we started doing that for a couple months. That was September, October 2019. And then I found out really quick. I was still doing my full-time job at that time, but I was like, I love this. Like the hustle's so fun. The game is so fun. I want to do this all the time. And I went to visit home. In November 2019. And at that time I had a disagreement, and I was gonna quit. I was literally on the phone to quit. I told my friends and family, I already told my mom, like, "Hey, I hope we can do this full time because I'm gonna quit." On that phone call with them, they fired me, which meant at that time they had to pay me severance, which was my startup capital. So from that moment, from November 2019, we were like, okay, now we know the cameras work. Can we turn it into the natural next step in terms of like, if you want to scale any kind of idea like that? I think you guys might have done some sneakers, or somebody in your crew.
That was me.
Maybe you can get away with it that way. But the real step is to do Amazon. And so we started to do some retail and online arbitrage from November 2019, December 2019, which is an amazing time to start, right? Like anyone who's been around, like that's the best time in the world to start, because FBM hits so hard at that time. Like whatever we could
rant about that all day. Oh my God.
We got so lucky because we started at that time. It's almost no risk, right? You can go to the store and pick up all the inventory and list it. And if it doesn't sell, I mean, like you can argue about the ethics, and we didn't have to ever do this, but you can return the stuff if you want, right? Like it's crazy. But anyway, if you get the right stuff and get the right process down, you'll never have to do that. And so that's what happened to us. But we pretty much got a risk-free, like 30-day trial of Amazon of being entrepreneurs. And luckily it worked, and we realized that we liked it. And so we did it for that month, and then Q4 ends and things do change a little bit. So you're like, oh, all that stuff that was hitting super hard a month ago, like I need to do a little bit more work now. And so I was actually leaving. I went to go back to Poland, where I was living at the time. And I started actually a 2-month backpacking trip in January of 2020 when the business started and everything. And I was doing it from the road. That was like my first experience kind of building the business from the road. And that took to what my home was at the time. They closed the border on 24-hour notice. I ended up staying, and then that was into March 2020. And then everything just exploded in March 2020, like e-com, I think changed at least a bit there. Like I went from, I think our biggest ever day at that point, like 4 or 5 months in the business, including Q4, was maybe like, I don't know, $2,000, $2,500 at that time. We were actually suspended for like 3 weeks at the very beginning. We had a lot of adversity at the beginning that I didn't know if it was like normal or abnormal. We got suspended 3 times in the first like 4 months that we were selling, and we couldn't figure out why. And it was for a total of like 6 weeks time or so, which is like super discouraging at the beginning.
Yeah.
And especially like when you don't know why, and like, I got all this inventory, this is all my money at this time, I'm trying to get it moving, and right off the bat, boom, suspended, boom, suspended, boom, suspended. And it was like, there was the last one, which is the biggest one, was 3 weeks long. And I just remember our account came back on one day, and in like 6 hours, we had crushed our previous total for that time. And it just all went from there. But yeah, that was kind of how it started. And that was the same reason getting suspended was how we moved from arbitrage to wholesale, which I'm sure your audience is more than familiar with.
Yeah.
but yeah, that's a little bit about the origin story. But just to be super clear with anyone who's listening, I don't want anyone to think I've got some crazy thing figured out about being remote or whatever. There are plenty of ways to do it, and I know you guys use prep centers and stuff, and that's definitely one way to do it. The best way to do it is to have a rock star partner who's willing and wanting to be in the US while you're abroad. My mom is an absolute savage. She's a rock star. Like I'm more of like, I'm less Amazon seller and more entrepreneur.
Mm-hmm.
She's a world-class Amazon seller. She's a savage.
Does she prep all your stuff?
We have a team now.
Nice.
There's including, we got a couple, now VA is a loose term. They're highly skilled individuals. We have 2 people who work for us full-time from the Philippines. And then we have a team of 4 or 5 in Indy, prepping and shipping our stuff out. My sister works with us full-time. We got another girl who works with us full-time. My grandma's a very lively old woman nowadays. She helps out a lot of stuff. So yeah, we got a full house.
And what type of volume are you doing these days?
In terms of monthly revenue, somewhere around, we were consistently around 125K per month, and we do a lot of volume on that. Our average sale price is about $15. We love small.
So that's low. Small. You literally just coming out of my mouth. Okay, so a few takeaways. 1, go read the 4-Hour Workweek if you haven't. If you're listening to this.
Definitely.
Yes, I know you don't like reading. You've never read a book you like. You'll like that book if you're listening to this, so go read it. Also,
yeah, awesome.
Was the marketing agency like a big like corporate one, or it kind of sounds like it was? Really? Oh, okay, cool.
No, we did affiliate. It was a total of about 40 people, and I was on a team of like 3 or 4.
I would
very small.
I would consider anything above like 5 to 10 people very corporate.
Man, I came from a company of like 280,000 employees before that, so for me that was a small business.
Yeah, true. Interesting. Damn. So you are like a very, very interesting guy. All the traveling, all that kind of stuff. Let's talk just on the Amazon side of things. So in terms of, is it all wholesale?
We're about 80% wholesale, 20% arbitrage, and that 20% is honestly just one hard hitter that we've kept since the beginning.
Whatever works. Yeah.
Yep. But to be honest with you, like, and let me take a second to say congratulations, Garrett. I'll be honest with you, I'm sorry I'm not as familiar with what you're doing, but I just saw that Miles, man, like the month we put up in April, like killer. Good for you, man. That's amazing.
We can talk about some of that stuff after, like that because I can like put you onto some things. Definitely.
I messaged you. I'm like, man, I gotta step back into arbitrage. I gotta do whatever you're doing.
Well, I'm trying to come out to Mexico or something. So, and what's interesting is you were talking about the schedule, and not necessarily that, but like you were talking about the schedule of selling on Amazon. And yeah, if there's ever a time to go away, it's like during Q1. And if there's ever a time not to go away, it's during back to school. Back to school in like December specifically. And another big takeaway is that if you are willing to merchant fulfill during December, you can make life-changing money on like everything is good in December. And please don't listen to the people. Please, FBM in December is worth your time and consider doing it. And you'll listen back to this podcast and think about and thank me. And everything.
So definitely. Miles and I were kicking around the idea of going on a trip next November, December, and Miles was like, "No, I'm on lockdown."
I'm talking about.
That's not a good time to travel.
Yeah, no, like because I live in a sales tax advantage state that I probably don't want to live forever. But like every December, it might be the move just to come back and like run it up merchant just for a month. Other than that, 0A to prep is the way. Or obviously doing it in house, being cheaper, and it makes sense. You have to do it in house with the small and light stuff.
Definitely. Yep.
And so you were excited about the small and light increase of the.
It's huge, man. It's huge. Yeah. If anybody has not, like, you should rerun everything. And what we'll do now,
because it just
maybe
changed
small,
right?
Yeah, man, it's a huge difference. So if this is something that we do that maybe a tip for people who are looking at stuff, especially when we do things different. So we don't go through tactical arbitrage exactly for our data. I kind of pick and choose data points from different sources that I've myself deemed to be better at. Keepa is the best. So if you go into Keepa, the best thing you can do is try to go into Keepa and go to like Product Finder or whatever, and try to, if you're decent with Excel or Google Sheets, which is kind of where I am strong, get that data from Keepa instead of tactical arbitrage. Tactical arbitrage data is very hit or miss, to say the least. Keepa is going to be better. But then if you're looking at stuff like what we're doing now, we just changed, is like anything that has a sale price now of like $11, give or take, and a buy price of like 4 or under. And if it spits back a current profit of like more than like losing $1 at a time, you know what I mean? You should manually run every single one of those items through small and light.
These are going to be cut in half essentially.
And tactical arbitrage and none of these tools are good at picking those up. They're really not. So there is less competition in small and light because it is one additional step that people might not be taking when you're doing your product research or analysis. And there is a lot of money to be made. A lot of people talk about high ticket items and stuff like that. And that's great. Like if that's what works for you, that's fantastic. But don't discount the small and light because there's a lot of money there.
So Ian, most of our audience is going to be arbitragers, whether it be online or RA. And one question we always ask our wholesale guests is, what was that transition like? What were some of the actionable steps that you personally took that worked well for you? Where did you learn? Where did you start sourcing from in the beginning? Take us through that whole transition process.
Yeah, I'm happy to. And it goes back to, like I said, we got suspended those 3 times, like right off the rip. And I was like in the Facebook groups and trying to figure out like, what can we do? And a few answers that I got back at that time was like, it's no matter when you start Amazon, anyone who's there's going to be a group of experienced people who are going to tell you at that time, oh, it's a terrible time to be a new seller. They're cracking down on new sellers. They're not going to let people do arbitrage anymore. Arbitrage is dead, all this stuff, right? And if you're at the beginning and you're in this wheel of death with Amazon, and anyone who's gone back and forth with seller performance or anyone, especially at the beginning, knows how discouraging and frustrating that stuff can be. So you start to believe a little bit like, oh, arbitrage really is dead. What if they don't take this receipt? What if this? What if that? And so those 3 suspensions and some advice from some other people got us onto wholesale. Because at that time it was like, oh, if I'm just going to keep getting asked, it's like, if they don't take the receipts for one time, and then what's going to happen to me? So it came up as like a more sustainable and scalable way to grow. All that's actually, I don't believe that it's true. I think arbitrage is fine. I don't think it's dead. I think there's a ton of money.
Yeah.
Go ahead. You know more than me. I'll defer.
Yeah, highly situationally dependent around what state you live in, sales tax wise. I could rant. That's another thing I could rant about all day. If you live in like Pennsylvania, Delaware, New Hampshire, South Dakota, Montana, Oregon, you have a massive advantage for arbitrage because you can buy stuff other people can't. But if you don't live in a state like that, you can ship to a prep center in a tax-free state, which way to get around it. Either way, there's an additional cost with that. But yeah, I would totally agree on your point, to be honest.
Because that 7, 8, 9% sales tax, it can be your margin.
Yeah,
it makes a huge difference.
Yeah.
And more, I also like the idea of being able to repeat order. And I know you guys have done a really good job of finding those. There are those replenishable arbitrage things. Like I said, we've had one for 1.5 years that we just keep hitting. They are out there and they are worth finding for sure. But with wholesale, the very nature of it is, or was at that time, it's changing a lot now, but is that it's supposed to be more repeatable. So when you factor in the amount of work that you're doing to find products, when you stretch it over 6 months or a year with wholesale, the amount that you're getting paid per hour to do your job at that point becomes very high. And wholesale will always kind of have that advantage to it as long as you like the work. And what I found was too, and like, I guess what it comes down to for everyone is, what process do you enjoy doing is ultimately probably the one that you're going to become more successful with. And I really like the wholesale model. I like the process of doing it. I love building the business. I think that with wholesale, a distinct advantage that you'll have with it over time is that the process of building a wholesale business for me is going to translate a lot to pretty much any other kind of e-commerce. It might be similar with arbitrage too, but especially with wholesale, when you're managing these relationships with suppliers, you're getting on the phone, you're doing the sales pitch, you're massaging these relationships, you're creating lead generation. All that translates really well to pretty much building any sort of small business. I love that about wholesale. I don't know about you guys. Do you guys imagine that you'll be Amazon sellers forever? Or where?
I was going to ask you the same thing. I was going to ask you so I guess you first then.
But you're not going to weasel out of this. I do want to know.
We'll get to it, definitely.
The answer for me is, and I kind of alluded to it earlier, is I'm entrepreneur first, at least the way I look at it. I'm an entrepreneur first, Amazon seller second. Amazon is purely the channel that has allowed me to to kind of express myself as an entrepreneur. So the answer is no. I don't believe that it will be this exact thing forever. And I've always built our business from the first day with that in mind. Like, I should never be the bottleneck to our business. And I should, like, the greatest thing I think that I can build in a business is something that runs without me at the center of it. That's the mark of, I think, of a good business and a good entrepreneur. So that's what I'm shooting for.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And so I personally like the 10 to 20K a month profit, which is probably, you know, like right around where you're at too. Like, it's dependent on month, like February, I was right around that, whatever. But like, that's what makes everything else possible. That's what gives you the security, you know, and everything. And I think, so, you know, it's hard to transcend beyond being just an Amazon, or like even just thinking about that, right? Because so many people, right, maybe they started out doing something they didn't like. I was like super lucky in that I started this in college, so I never really had to go through that. You know what I mean? I was like lucky in that regard. But as I've, you know, like I would think I want to do like a solo YouTube video about this. But like, you skill stack over time, right? You know, you said you learned operations at Target, you learned, I assume,
Exactly,
marketing agency, that stuff. This teaches you relationships, reading data, all that. Like, I like reselling taught me the reading data part, doing the content made me a marketer. And I think make it like, I'm going to get to like $1 million in the bank from like reselling and stuff, but 5 and 10 is going to come from like marketing. And that might be ecom. Like, I would love to have my own brand or something like that. Just the creative freedom of it, or like personal brand. I don't know, building stuff off like content and this type of thing. But yeah, I definitely something else, but like, I wouldn't mind doing this because I know I can build wealth with this, you know, over the next few years, but I don't think at the aggressive pace I want to.
Yeah, and I think we have Garrett, I would love to hear yours.
Yeah,
too. I think we have a similar thing
that
this is an amazing tool to kind of like gather resources together. And then ultimately the goal is going to be to deploy those resources in ways that continue to appreciate, right? Like that's the game. That's the game that we're all playing, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think if we talk to a lot of, you know, bigger time Amazon sellers, and they all kind of have that same message where, you know, 5-10 years in the micro, it's Amazon hard, but 15-20 years, it's real estate, it's brand, it's wherever that translates to. But man, in the 5-10-15 year micro vision, it's hard to pass up the cash flow opportunity that Amazon presents.
It's incredible.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay. So kind of switching back to the travel stuff. So this is like a topic I personally know a ton of people need to hear more about, and we kind of glossed over it a bit, definitely partially my fault, but talk to us about the geographic piece of things and what that actually looks like for you and many other people on the internet as well.
Sure. Which part do you mean? And I have an idea of something that I think will add value to people, but I want to make sure I understand your question first.
So right, the internet-based business, internet being worldwide, right? So you're conducting business domestically in the States, but you live right now. You said you were in Colombia during the major world event. You were in Guatemala recently, or Costa Rica, one of those, or probably both. I don't know. I know
I've been in Mexico for a while, since August. I lived in Colombia for a year and a half before that. Those have been my big places in Latin America. Yeah, those have been my homes.
Yeah. So kind of just walk us through basically define the term, you know what I mean? Just kind of, because like that's some of the coolest stuff to learn about for me. I haven't like experimented with that or anything, but definitely.
Yeah, I mean, anyone who's familiar with any kind of arbitrage, which is probably the majority of people that are watching this, it's the same thought, but instead of buying products at different prices, you see that there's a discrepancy in the market between Walmart clearance and Amazon. And if you start realizing that you can earn money in dollars, but you start to see that things cost different in Mexican pesos, you know, or, you know, Colombian pesos, that starts to be a fun little game that you can play. And if you're in a position where you can take a risk geographically, things start to get really interesting. So for example, just to put some really hard numbers behind what I did, a piece of this is like, you need to be comfortable with the judgment of your friends and people around you, which is very much easier said than done. I actually ran these numbers the other day because I was curious about this. I took a 75% pay cut from Target to leave, which is hard for a lot of people to do, but geographic arbitrage gives you that sort of freedom because it allows you so much freedom and creativity. If you know that you're not happy with your career or how you're spending your time, if you can cut your expenses by 80%, and suddenly instead of needing to make $4,000 per month to maintain the lifestyle that you might not be happy in, you can make $1,000 per month and start to either build a lifestyle that you know you'll be happy with, or one that you will be happy with in that moment. And that opening that door becomes really interesting. And add on top of that, this is not even accounting for any value around the experience of living and traveling abroad, which is, I mean, it's massive. I recommend it to everyone. I think the world would truly, this is cliche to say, but I think the world would truly be at a better place if more people were to travel and especially live in other cultures. It's a net positive. So when you factor in all those things, geographic arbitrage becomes the best trade you can make pretty much your whole life, in my opinion. The immediate increase in quality of life that geographic arbitrage can hand you in the matter of a month or a second is unparalleled. We talk about the opportunity on Amazon in terms of cash flow, and it's massive. But the opportunity, most people are doing this because they want to increase their quality of life in some kind of way, right? There's no bigger way, I don't think, you can immediately increase your quality of life than geographic arbitrage. You just need to get to that point where you're able to make that leap if it's what you want to do, right? Like a lot of people, this will not be for them. A lot of people might not want to live in a place where they don't speak the language. They might not want to learn a new language. They might get to some place and be like, oh, I really miss the comforts of home. That's totally fine. It's not for everyone. But if you're young and travel and living abroad and this kind of lifestyle interests you, then the arbitrage on top of it makes it's undeniable. It's a massive opportunity. Yeah.
So like, how much is the place you're in right now, which looks, pretty gorgeous and everything, based on what we're seeing just off the Zoom?
I would rather give you, this is the most I've paid for a place.
All right. Back in the day. Well, yeah. What, like back in the first couple trips. Yeah.
I can tell you, I was looking at this just the other day. The average rent I've paid over the last 4 years, which I've been abroad full time for 4.5 years. The average rent I've paid during that time is less than $500 per month.
I thought you were gonna say like 1,000, because you like that place looks all, and I'm sure it's a little.
I'll tell you right now, I'm paying $1,000 a month for this. Okay. This is the most I've ever paid for an apartment. But I'd like to. I mean, I would flip it. I wish I could give you a quick tour. Like, this is a very nice place. This is the most I've ever paid. I'm enjoying myself now, but for the last few years, my average rent per month has been $500 per month, and everything else scales down with that, right? In terms of food, a lot of other things just become super accessible if you're able to get away from those. Honestly, the thing that prevents a lot of people is the long-term commitments that you make, whether it be a car or a lease. You have a kid, you have a wife. Obviously, these things make it really tough, right? The financial things are much easier to finagle around than if you got family and stuff and roots. Like, it's not gonna be for you, right? It might not, unless your whole family wants to do it. But if you're in a position, everything becomes really interesting in terms of finances.
And what's crazy is Tim Ferriss was talking about this stuff in like 07, 08.
Yeah, he was so far ahead of it.
Yeah, man. And like virtual assistants and stuff like that. So I'm going to reiterate, if you guys are listening to this and you think we're going to help you out with your business, like go read that book, and that'll help you out a lot more. I promise.
That's right.
What country is next on your list? Do you have any specific?
Yeah, I've been waiting to get down to Argentina for a while, but actually, I'm starting, like I said, I've been doing this for years at this point. And after a certain time, like now I'm looking for something different than when I first left, right? Mm-hmm. When I first left, it was like, flip my world. I want my world to be flipped upside down, right? Like, I want to live in somewhere like a different planet. And China was like a different planet. And now after a few years, like, I'm starting to look more towards like, where's home going to be? Where's somewhere I'll be comfortable long-term? I had to leave Colombia because of some visa stuff. And that stuff starts to get really tricky. So I'm actually like I've just finished, like, I'm a fully legal resident of Mexico at this point, and I'm working towards Mexican citizenship over the next few years. And so I imagine that Mexico probably will be home for at least some portion of my future. But in terms of like immediate travel plans, Argentina is high on my wish list.
Do you speak Spanish now?
I do, yeah.
Cool. Awesome.
I would assume so.
Oh yeah, hey,
man. And honestly, like, in terms of like building this business and stuff, I've like, we've had a lot of challenges learning Spanish from nothing at like, it gets harder scientifically, like biologically, as you get a little older. Like learning Spanish has been just as hard as
don't they say
as
the
building the
best time to learn
business.
a language is like between 3 and 5 or like that?
Oh yeah, there's no comparison.
You haven't even really learned English yet at that point. So
yeah, exactly. You want to get it early. But yeah, it's been extremely challenging. But fortunately, at this point, after a couple of years, yeah, I do speak it.
Mm-hmm.
Something I'm super curious. What's the dynamic of your whole company culture? Is there just one big group chat with all your family members and you just talk and shop the whole thing?
No, yeah, we use Slack, and part of the experience at that marketing agency was kind of seeing how a remote company worked. And I took a lot of our principles and processes from, like, if it works for a team of 40 or 50, I think I can make it work for our team of like, 9 or 10. And so it all just happens in Slack. But honestly, it's mostly just like my mom and I in there, and then me kind of communicating and working with our couple analysts in the Philippines. My mom manages the whole operation there in India with my sister kind of at the head of it. So yeah, it's cool.
And are you a brand direct or distributor based wholesaler for the most part?
Distributor. Yeah, distributor. There's plenty of opportunity with the brands, but in general, it's a lot more work, and I think it's there, and I think people should do it, but it's undeniable that the path of least resistance is through distributors. They want to say yes to you,
That makes sense. Yeah,
Take us
especially
to that first account that you won. Were you looking for a specific category? Do you recommend that new wholesalers look for a specific category, or what sort of mindset were you in looking for that first one?
We started out in beauty. So when we did that Q4, I don't know if it'll work anymore, but if Q4 rolls around and you're wanting to dip your toes in, go into Ulta, because that's where we started. We pretty much went into Ulta and cleared some shelves out. And so we got on our way in beauty. And the idea behind it is pretty straightforward. Within beauty, there's a lot of smaller items that are higher dollar, and people are continuing to buy them over and over. All that makes sense in terms of Amazon with fees and stuff. So we started with beauty. We transitioned when we were doing wholesale. We started looking into grocery as well, and we still do primarily beauty, grocery, health and household, that sort of stuff. But whatever you want to do. I don't think there's any category that people should or shouldn't start with or get turned away from or whatever. I mean, you guys put out, like, we got ungated through Frontier Co-op years ago. I'm pretty sure you guys put out some info about them. It's the go-to spot. If you need an invoice, go to Frontier Co-op. That'll get you into beauty pretty quick. So we did beauty and grocery, and that was it.
And what do you tell someone in the foreign, like when you're traveling and such, like right now you meet someone, what do you tell them you do, like for work? I
never know what to say, to be honest with you guys. It just, most of the time I just say I sell on Amazon. And then based on their response, I'll go deeper or not.
Yeah. Oh, that's yeah. See, and like e-com entrepreneur sounds sick, to be honest, but you kind of sound like a dickhead if you say that too. So sounds good. That sounds better. That's
yeah. And especially on the road, you do meet, like, it's funny that, like, you do meet certain kinds of people. There's now, like, for better or for worse, now that all these like corporate jobs are remote, you start to meet a big mix of people. And something about being in corporate America, like, some lingo comes along with it. And I know that I was guilty of it a couple of years ago, but you just see it come up. And for me, it turns me away a little bit, like some lingo and jargon. And so I try to, like, be as vague as possible until I know if, like, we're going to have a real conversation or not about it, which most of the time not. I'm shocked that, like, I think I have one, like, friend on the road here who's an Amazon seller, but he does, like, merch. I don't know any other like full Amazon sellers on, like, out here.
Yeah. And have you talked?
So you guys should come down.
Yeah. Have you talked to, like, do you know Romer or Taylor or Ben Books? Any of those guys?
I know of them. I've seen them across, like, your guys' page and stuff across Instagram, but I don't know them. I've never talked to them.
Yeah.
I'll be happy to. They travel or they come down here?
Yeah. So Taylor is in and Ben's actually in Costa Rica too. And then Romer was in Colombia and is going back to Colombia this month.
What part? Do you know?
Ooh, Cali. And then, Cali for the Colombia part.
Cool. Good for him.
Yeah. He's a big salsa dancer. Or something like
that. That is the capital. That is the spot for it. That is the place to go in Colombia.
Sense.
That makes perfect sense.
Cool. And kind of coming back to more technical stuff, walk us through the, like, tools and stuff you're using, and including the VAs, kind of their workflow and stuff for your Amazon business.
Yep. Yeah, and software is so important. We use a mixture of tactical arbitrage, wholesale inspector, which I would not recommend to people, Keepa, which I would absolutely recommend to everyone if it should be your Bible. But even within Keepa, so like I alluded to earlier, I think something that would do people well if you're sharp with Excel, going into Keepa and not just using the extension that gets built into listings, but actually going and digging into Keepa, the website. I mean, there's just so much data to get through there. That I don't think people will take. Keepa is amazing just as an extension, but if you add in the amount of data they make accessible to you through the website, it's really, really good. So we use those. AZ Insight, we used to use RepSailor. AZ Insight, I believe, is superior. Smart Scout's really good. And then, so those are like the typical Amazon stuff. I'm not sure if I'm missing something there or not, but we use Channel Max. Yeah, we do Channel Max.
I've never heard of that. Garrett, have you heard of that?
Pricing? I have not.
Yeah.
I thought you were
we used to use Aura
guy for some reason. Oh, yeah.
No, I'm looking at it. I was always like,
someone's making money if they're using Seller Snap. That's providing.
And like, we're just at the point where it's like, all right, I think I should probably go back and test it out again, because it was always like when we probably changed reprice like a year ago, and at that point, like Seller Snap's what, like $500 a month.
Yeah, it's expensive.
I was always thinking like, we can't justify that really, because Channel Max was $35 a month and now we pay $50 because our SKUs are higher. But I think we're probably at a point where I would like to go back and test again. I love trying new tools. Like, it's my favorite thing. But at the time, I just remember looking at it and being like, well, I don't know if $500 justifies it, but it can easily. I understand mathematically how it can justify itself. Yeah. But we use Channel Max, and Channel Max is really fast and good support. And I would recommend it to anyone small. I got it as a recommendation from Scott Needham, which I'm sure you guys know at Buyboxer. And it's been fine for us.
Yeah.
So what does that do that Aura doesn't? Just out of curiosity.
I was not satisfied with Aura's reporting functions and their lack of development. So they were always like, oh, this stuff's right around the corner. The UI was really good. Dylan and those guys seemed like sharp kids. It just didn't feel like they were getting anywhere with it. It felt like they put like this really nice, no disrespect to these guys, really beautiful, nicely packaged idea and interface. But once you started to use it for a period of time, I just felt like there was a little bit of depth missing there. And they were charging 3 times the price of what I could get at Channel Max. So that's why we switched. I'll be happy to go back if they improve those things. I just haven't looked. But that's why we switched.
And what's your day-to-day look like in terms of your total like working hours per day and stuff like that?
How many hours do I work per day?
Yeah, and just like kind
of changes so much, man. It's tough.
Working on. Yeah, I'm sure.
But yeah, and that's fine. I'm happy to talk about all this stuff. In general, I sit down for like, my goal is to have like 6 hours of like deep work. You know what I mean? Like, I'm phone do not disturb. Nobody touch me for 6 hours a day. I feel like if I do that, things are going to go pretty well. What I work on in those times changes drastically. I build a lot of processes. So my job over the last 2.5 years or whatever it's been has more or less been to build the tools and processes that makes our company function. I don't know what that title would be, but that is essentially what I do. So we kind of do our own kind of custom proprietary way of analyzing products, which is a way that I kind of aggregate data from Tactical Arbitrage, Wholesale Inspector, and Keepa, formatted in a way that I like, and then I kind of run some logic against it, which is all built through Google Sheets, which essentially pulls any items that we believe would be interesting based on our criteria that we look at, and makes it so our analysts can go through those in a strategic way. So I essentially will score items based on how I feel about them from 0 to 100. And then have our analysts go through from 100 to like 80 or whatever. If it had a score below 80, for example, we'll move on, because especially with wholesale, it's a massive game of numbers and efficiency. And so how do you process 50,000 items per week in catalogs while, not spending 1,000 hours of labor doing that? That's what I do. And I know that's vague. But that's what I do.
Yeah, finishing up, I really agree with the point of digging into Keepa, specifically like Keepa Product Finder. You can put in all that criteria Amazon not on it, sale price, even the buy box variants. All that's pretty cool. Kind of just finishing up here. So what would your main tips be for people looking to get started just on Amazon in general, and also the wholesale piece? Because we have a lot of would love to start wholesale viewers as well.
Yeah. Get really good at processes, because that's ultimately going to be the thing. Like you're not going to be able to, there's always the next thing that you want to work on. It was the beautiful thing of Amazon, right? Like there's endless opportunity, but time is not endless. So the only way that you can really scale your time is to find a way to get good at explaining and building processes that are repeatable for, hopefully, if you can convince other people to come work on your idea with you, you need to be able to get them to execute on those things. And that comes with processes. And with that, like software, for example, one thing I'll recommend people do, and that I didn't get into with our tech stack, is like Asana or some sort of project management tool. So we manage the flow. I manage deal flow as well. I manage deal flow from start to finish. And we use Asana to do that. So it goes from, in Asana, something like this catalog needs to be put through and organized for our analysts. I do that. Once it's organized, they're going to make that first run through, and then they're going to mark them as like potential winners, what they believe could be good. And then we're going to have my mom, who's the expert, be like, yeah, we want this, and this. And then I'm going to send the order to the supplier and then check the invoice. Each of these are steps, right? Where you like, that's a process. Each of those is a process that a team needs to be able to execute without you. We use Asana to do that. So getting good at project management, delegating, building repeatable and sustainable and scalable systems and processes. I think that's going to be the thing that is going to allow people to really build a business and not a job. Because I think that's a distinction that needs to be talked about, at least for me, is super important. It's the reason that I do this, right? I didn't quit my job or get fired from my job to get another one, right? Like the goal is to build a business. It's the constant cliche of, are you working on your business or in it? So I think the way to make that step from working in to working on is to be really good at those things that I just said. That'd be it. And I know that's vague, but that's it. Like, think about anytime you're doing something, think about, is this going to be, how do I repeat this? It's going to take, it always takes more time. It's always way harder and takes way more time, but it's always worth it in the long run, right? You need to eat that time at the beginning to build it and document it and share it in a way where other people are able to execute it the same as you.
All right. Amazing. Yeah. So thanks a lot for coming on. Where can
I flew by.
Yeah. Seriously. Yeah. Where can people find you on Instagram, or what at can they find you by on Instagram?
Yeah. Sure. It's just my full name, Ian Klotz, IANKLOTZ. I'm sure you can find it somewhere in here as well. One thing for people, I don't have anything to sell. I don't promote anything. I don't do a lot of social. I probably should do more. But if anyone's going to,
you really should.
Hey, thank you, man. I appreciate you saying that. If anyone's going to go to VCon, I would love to meet up with anyone.
Wait. Are you a season 1 holder?
Series 1, yeah. Yes, I am.
Really? Wait, what do you have?
I have a Tasteful Malayan Tapir.
All right.
And I have
that's like $30,000 or something. Yeah.
Something. Yeah.
Did you get it on the mint?
So, funny story. I tried. I tried to mint 3 times.
Yeah.
And my transaction didn't go through. I didn't know anything about NFTs at this time.
Yeah, this was a year ago. Yeah.
And they didn't go through. And I was like, screw it. I'm living life in Colombia. I got everything good going on. I'm just going to go back to my normal life. And then, so I lost out on the mint. I ended up buying it. And obviously, if anyone follows it closely, you know that I took a huge L. And I bought again in November. So the thing that got me to buy again was like Gary in like the Discord and stuff was like, hey, if you missed Series 1 and you're thinking about picking it up, now's the time. Yeah. And he's like, if you're close, I'll jump on a FaceTime with you and get you over the line and tell you what I think is good to buy. So anyway, I got on FaceTime with Gary.
Oh,
yeah. It was like, this is like, for me, I don't know, like, it's probably the same as you guys. Gary's like God to me. He's helped me. Like, he's my guy.
Yeah.
And so just getting a couple minutes to talk to him. And then he was like, hey, based on what the current market is, I think this is a good buy. And so I bought it.
Did you run the Impulsive Gary V episode yet?
No, I saw that it came out. I've been waiting
hours ago. Yeah. All right, cool.
Yeah.
That's very good stuff. Yeah. So definitely go follow Ian if you're interested in like any of the Amazon travel and stuff. and all that. But cool. Yeah. And thanks a lot for listening.
And hit me up if you're going to VCon. I'm going with like one other friend. I would love to meet some people in VCon. If you're going to be in Minneapolis, let me know. I'd love to meet up
a couple of my friends from Twitter. And by the way, guys, we're posting on Wednesdays now. So that's the day we're uploading. So once a week on Wednesdays and all that. But yep. See you guys next Wednesday.